Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into the latest official numbers on insolvency in Canada. And trust me, they tell a really fascinating story about where the economy is at right now.
So let's just jump right in with the big one. In 2024, Canada saw just over 143,000 insolvency filings. And pretty much all of these fall under what's called the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, or BIA. That's really the main rulebook for personal and most business debt in the country.
But, that number on its own doesn't give you the full picture. The really interesting part is that it's a 12.1% jump from the year before. That's not just a little blip. It's a pretty clear sign that financial pressure was seriously building for a lot of Canadians. And this is probably the most important thing to grasp. We're not just back to where things were before the pandemic. We've actually blown past it. The number of people filing for insolvency in 2024 is now officially higher than it was back in 2019, and that's a huge deal. Okay, so to really get what's going on with these numbers, we have to quickly look at the two main federal laws that handle this stuff, because they lay out very, very different paths depending on who's filing.
On one side, you've got the BIA. This is the big one, the framework for almost all filings, whether you're an individual or a business. But then, on the other side, you have the CCAA, which is this very specific tool that's only for major corporate restructurings.
Think of the CCAA as a lifeline for huge, complicated companies. It's basically designed to give them a chance to reorganize and hopefully avoid just shutting down completely. But it's a bit of an exclusive club with a pretty high barrier to entry.
And this is the number that draws the line in the sand. A company has to owe its creditors more than $5 million just to be eligible for CCAA protection. Yeah, that $5 million price of entry is what separates the handful of massive corporate restructurings from, well, the thousands and thousands of other filings we see under the BIA.
Right, so if it's not the corporate giants filing, then who is? Well, the data is crystal clear. It's regular people, individual consumers. Now, you hear the word consumer and you think you know what it means, right? But in legal terms, it's actually super specific. And that distinction is really important because it separates someone with personal financial trouble from a business that's going under.
So here's the litmus test. It's pretty simple. Is more than half of your total debt from, everyday life stuff? We're talking credit cards, a car loan, lines of credit, that kind of thing? Or is it from running a business? If the majority is personal stuff, boom, you're legally defined as a consumer debtor.
Okay, so once the law sees you as a consumer debtor, you basically have two main paths you can take under the BIA. The first is a full-on bankruptcy. The other is something called a proposal, which is more like a formal, legally binding plan you offer your creditors to pay things back under new terms. So let's talk real numbers. What kind of debt are we actually looking at for the average Canadian who has to go down one of these paths? The 2024 data is pretty specific. If you filed for a consumer bankruptcy in 2024, the average amount of debt you declared was just over $125,000. That's the total amount you officially told the court you owed when you filed the paperwork. Now, what about for a proposal? Well, it was a little lower, but still a really big number, just shy of $115,000 on average for those who filed a consumer proposal. And this right here is a really crucial trend. Even though the debt levels are pretty close for both options, proposals are way more popular now. We're talking nearly 80% of all filings. And what that suggests is that Canadians are really trying to find ways to handle their debt without going into full bankruptcy, probably to hang on to key assets like their house. So who are these folks and where do they live? The data lets us zoom in on the demographics and see where in Canada this is all happening. You can see it right here in the chart. The biggest slice of the pie, almost 38%, is people between 35 and 49 years old. And that makes sense, right? That's often when you're juggling a mortgage, raising kids, and all those other big life expenses. And when you look at a map of Canada, these increases are really concentrated in the most populated provinces. As you can see, Ontario saw the biggest jump in sheer numbers by far, with Quebec and Alberta right behind. So this quote from the official report really brings us full circle, right back to where we started. It confirms what we saw in the numbers. We're not just back to pre-pandemic levels, we've actually edged past them. It's like a whole new chapter for consumer debt in Canada. When you put it all together, this data paints a really clear financial picture of Canada in 2024. And with personal insolvencies now surpassing those pre-pandemic levels, the critical question isn't just about what this means for individual families, it's about what this signals for the health of the entire Canadian economy. It really suggests that while the pandemic's initial shock might be over, its financial aftershocks are still being felt.